The throne Mechanicum maintained a constant temperature of 37.2 degrees Celsius, slightly above human body temperature. The heat came from the neural interface systems, from the ancient machinery that connected pilot consciousness to night systems. I noticed the warmth first during my earliest training sessions, age 14, when my father allowed me to sit in the throne for 5-minute intervals to acclimate my nervous system to the initial connection protocols. My name was Castor Valdane, third son of House Valdane, Night World Adarath, born into a lineage that had piloted the Night Paladin Argentum Fury for 743 years across 22 generations. The throne was our inheritance, our duty, our prison, though I did not understand this initially. I remember my father's face the first time he explained what the throne Mechanicum truly was. I was 12 years old. We stood in the sacristy, the chamber where Argentum Fury rested between deployments. The night towered above us, 14 meters of blessed machinery and adamantium plate, bearing the scars of 3 centuries of warfare. My father placed his hand on the knight's foot, a gesture of familiarity and reverence. "The throne remembers," he said. "Every pilot who has bonded with Argentum Fury leaves an imprint, a fragment of consciousness, an echo of personality. When you connect to the throne, you will not pilot alone. You will carry our ancestors with you." "Like ghosts?" I asked. "Like passengers," my father said. "They will guide you. They will lend you their experience, their instincts, their hatred of the enemy. This is our strength. We do not fight as individuals. We fight as the accumulated weight of all who came before." He smiled. His smile did not reach his eyes. "Is it difficult?" I asked. "Hearing them, you become accustomed," my father said. "Most of the time they are quiet. Background presence. Occasionally one will speak more clearly, usually during combat when adrenaline and neural stress open deeper connections. You learn to distinguish their voices from your own thoughts. You learn to accept their counsel. You learn to function as collective rather than individual. What if they disagree with your decisions?" My father's smile faded completely. "Then you exercise will and maintain control. The pilot commands, the ancestors advise. This hierarchy must not reverse." He did not tell me what happened if hierarchy reversed. I would learn this through experience. I began formal pilot training at age 16, standard age for Knight Scions who showed aptitude for throne interface. The training was progressive. First, basic neural synchronization, learning to feel the Knight's systems as extensions of your own body, translating thought into mechanical response. Then weapons control, movement coordination, tactical awareness. Finally, combat deployment under supervision. The ancestors were present throughout. I felt them as pressure at the edges of my consciousness, whispers just below auditory threshold, instincts that were not quite mine but felt natural enough to accept. Most were indistinct, general presences without clear identity, but 3 manifested with particular clarity. My father, whose consciousness was most recent, felt protective and analytical. His presence appeared during complex maneuvers, offering suggestions about weapon selection or positioning. My grandfather, 7 pilots back, felt stern and procedural. His presence emphasized doctrine and proper form. And Lord Arcturus Valdane, 11th generation pilot who had died approximately 400 years ago, felt like concentrated violence barely contained. His presence appeared during combat, not suggestions. Demands, imperatives toward aggression that felt almost compulsory. I learned to manage them. The training supervisors taught techniques for maintaining psychological boundaries while accepting ancestral input. Mental compartmentalization. Conscious acknowledgement followed by independent decision-making. Meditation rituals that reinforced pilot primacy. It was manageable. The ancestors were tools. Advisors, they did not control. I controlled. This was doctrine. This was how night pilots functioned across the Imperium. We were not possessed. We were augmented by inherited experience. I believed this completely. My first combat deployment occurred in my 20th year. Orc raiders had made planetfall on Adarath's southern continent, approximately 14,000 hostiles with crude armor and artillery support. House Valdane deployed 6 knights in support of planetary defense forces. I piloted Argentum Fury as part of the Lance, under command of Baron Ulrich Valdane, my distant cousin and House military commander. The engagement was straightforward. We advanced across open terrain toward the Orc positions. PDF forces provided infantry screening. Orbital reconnaissance had identified Orc heavy weapons emplacements that required elimination before ground forces could advance safely. Our Lance's objective was to destroy these emplacements. I felt calm during the approach. The throne's neural interface created mild dissociation. My consciousness existed partially in my body and partially in the knight's machine systems. I perceived through the knight's auspex and visual senses. I felt the knight's stride as my own movement, the distinction between self and machine blurred by design. This was proper synchronization. The ancestors were present, but quiet. I felt my father's attention focused on tactical display analysis. My grandfather's presence emphasized maintaining formation discipline. Lord Arcturus remained dormant, attention waiting at the back of my awareness. Contact occurred at 3 kilometers. The Orcs opened fire with their crude artillery, projectile weapons that relied on mass and explosive force rather than precision. Several rounds struck Argentum Fury's void shields, flaring bright blue as the shields converted kinetic energy to dispersed illumination. The shields held. We continued advancing. Baron Ulrich's voice came through the Vox. "Lance, engage at will. Priority targets are heavy emplacements grid 47 Gamma, overlapping fields of fire. Standard suppression protocols." I acknowledged and brought Argentum Fury's rapid-fire battle cannon online. The weapon's targeting system highlighted 3 Orc artillery pieces. I fired. The cannon's recoil transmitted through the throne as mild vibration. All 3 targets were destroyed. The Orcs began repositioning their remaining guns. This continued for 18 minutes. We advanced methodically, destroying Orc positions, absorbing return fire on our void shields, maintaining formation. The PDF forces followed, securing cleared territory. The operation proceeded exactly as trained. Then an Orc vehicle broke from concealment, a ramshackle battle wagon, heavily armored, mounting what appeared to be a massive cannon constructed from fusion plant components. It fired at the knight to my right, piloted by Sir Damien Carros, a pilot 3 years my senior. The round penetrated Damien's void shields. His shields had been weakened by sustained fire and had not fully regenerated. The round struck his knight's left leg at the knee joint. The joint exploded. Damien's knight collapsed. Through the Vox I heard Damien screaming. The neural feedback from catastrophic damage translated to pain in the pilot's nervous system. Not physical pain, his body was intact, but phantom pain, psychological trauma from feeling his knight wounded as though it were his own body. The Orc battle wagon was turning toward another target. I felt Lord Arcturus Valdane surge forward in my consciousness, not gradually, not as suggestion, as overwhelming imperative that felt like my own thought, but carried weight and compulsion that my thoughts did not normally possess. Destroy it, kill them, make them suffer for what they did. I turned Argentum Fury toward the battle wagon and fired the battle cannon. The wagon's armor held. I fired again. Third shot penetrated. The wagon exploded. Crew incinerated. But Lord Arcturus was not satisfied. The presence in my mind expanded, spreading from background whisper to dominant voice. I felt rage that was not mine but felt authentic, felt justified, felt necessary. More. There are more of them. Kill them all. I advanced toward the Orc positions. Baron Ulrich was calling orders through the Vox. Something about regrouping, about maintaining formation. I heard him, but the words did not register as relevant. What mattered was the Orcs. What mattered was destruction. I brought Argentum Fury into close range with the Orc infantry. They were attempting to fall back, to reposition behind cover. I fired into them. The battle cannon was designed for armored targets, not infantry. Using it against infantry was inefficient, but it was satisfying. No, not satisfying to me. Satisfying to Lord Arcturus, but I could not distinguish the difference. I crushed several orcs beneath Argentum Fury's feet. The knight weighed approximately 430 tons. The orcs became paste. I felt Lord Arcturus's approval like warmth spreading through my consciousness. Yes, this is what we are. This is our purpose. Destruction. Dominance. Make them fear us. Baron Ulrich's voice. More urgent. Caster, withdraw to formation. You are overextended. The orcs were routing now, running from the knights. This was victory. This was what we had come to achieve. Why withdraw? I pursued them. Argentum Fury could reach 32 kilometers per hour at full stride. The orcs could not outrun me. I caught them and killed them. Battle cannon, then Reaper chainsword when I reached melee range. The chainsword was 7 meters long, powered by plasma-fed motors. It was designed to tear through armored vehicles. Against orc infantry, it was obscenely excessive. I did not care. Lord Arcturus did not care. We were unified in purpose. They had wounded one of our lance. They deserved extinction. By the time I regained independent awareness, the immediate battlefield was empty. I had pursued the orcs for approximately 1 kilometer beyond our designated operational zone. Approximately 200 orcs lay dead in my wake. This was far more than tactical necessity required. Baron Ulrich's voice through the vox, cold and measured. Caster, return to formation immediately. Confirmed, I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. I turned Argentum Fury and began walking back. Lord Arcturus receded in my consciousness, satisfied, returning to dormant state. As his presence withdrew, I felt something like shame creeping in to fill the space he had occupied. I had lost control. I had allowed an ancestor's rage to override my tactical judgment. I had broken formation and endangered myself through overextension. But no one had died because of it. I had killed enemies. I had protected my lance by destroying threats. This was acceptable outcome, even if method was questionable. I reported to Baron Ulrich after we returned to base. He received me in his command chamber, a utilitarian room containing tactical displays and house heraldry. He did not offer me seat. He stood behind his desk and looked at me with expression I could not categorize. Your first combat deployment included significant tactical deviation, Ulrich said. You broke formation. You pursued enemies beyond operational parameters. You endangered yourself and potentially compromised lance coordination. Explain your reasoning. Sir Damien was wounded, I said. I engaged the unit responsible. Then I eliminated remaining threats to prevent regrouping. You eliminated routed forces who no longer posed strategic threat, Ulrich said. You expended ammunition and exposed yourself to potential ambush for kills that provided no tactical value. This suggests loss of discipline, or loss of control. Which was it? Admitting loss of control meant admitting psychological weakness, potential unsuitability for night piloting. But lying to a superior officer violated house honor codes. I felt strong impulse toward aggressive action, I said carefully. One of the ancestors was particularly vocal. I allowed his perspective to influence my decisions more than I should have. Ulrich's expression shifted slightly. Not surprise. Recognition, Lord Arcturus. Yes, Baron. He is the most dangerous presence in Argentum Fury's throne, Ulrich said. He died in battle 400 years ago, killed during boarding action against traitor forces. He died angry. That anger did not dissipate with death. It persists in the throne's neural patterns. Every pilot who has bonded with Argentum Fury since has felt his rage. Most learn to manage it. Some do not. I want to know which category you fall into. I will maintain better control, I said. See that you do, Ulrich said. Night pilots who cannot distinguish their own will from ancestral influence are liability. If Lord Arcturus dominates your consciousness during combat, You become unpredictable. Unpredictable knights endanger their lances. I will not tolerate that risk. Do you understand? Yes, Baron. Dismissed. I left his chamber. I told myself I would maintain control. I told myself the incident was learning experience, that I now understood the danger and would implement better psychological safeguards. I told myself Lord Arcturus was manageable. I was incorrect on all counts. Over the following 3 years, I deployed 17 more times. Various combat scenarios, pirate suppression, PDF support operations, defense against minor Xenos incursions. I performed adequately in most engagements. I followed orders. I maintained formation. I killed enemies with acceptable efficiency. But Lord Arcturus was always present, always waiting. Every combat engagement gave him opportunity to push forward in my consciousness. His rage was patient. It did not manifest constantly. It waited for moments of stress, moments when my conscious control weakened, moments when violence was already occurring, and one additional degree of aggression seemed reasonable. I learned his patterns. I developed coping mechanisms, meditation before deployment, conscious reinforcement of pilot primacy, mental exercises that strengthened boundaries between my consciousness and ancestral presences. These mechanisms worked approximately 80% of the time. The other 20%, Lord Arcturus would slip through, never as dramatically as during my first deployment, just small losses of control, pursuing enemies slightly too far, using excessive force when lesser force would suffice, feeling satisfaction, his satisfaction, but experienced as mine, when enemies died in particularly violent ways. I told myself this was acceptable. I told myself every night pilot dealt with similar struggles. The ancestors were always present. Managing them was part of the role. Perfect control was impossible. Adequate control was sufficient. I maintained this rationalization until I met Brother Sergeant Matthias Kell of the Imperial Fists. Our house was assigned to support an Imperial Fists strike force during campaign against Chaos cultists on world-designated Svarthane 7. The cultists had established fortified positions in the world's industrial sectors. The Astartes would conduct the primary assault. Our knights would provide heavy fire support and eliminate armored targets. I met Matthias during the pre-deployment strategic briefing. He was Brother Sergeant of 5th Tactical Squad, responsible for coordinating ground force movements with night lance operations. He stood 2.1 meters tall in his power armor, bearing the yellow and black heraldry of his chapter. His face was scarred across the left cheek from some previous engagement. He reviewed the tactical display with our lance commander, identifying primary objectives and coordination protocols. Then he turned to me specifically. "You pilot Argentum Fury," he said. "Not question, statement." "Yes, Brother Sergeant," I said. "I have reviewed your combat records," Matthias said. "You show tendency toward aggressive overextension during close combat. Excessive force application. Pattern suggests difficulty maintaining tactical discipline under stress. Is this assessment accurate?" I was surprised by his directness. Astartes were known for bluntness, but this felt particularly pointed. "I maintain adequate combat effectiveness," I said. "Adequate is not the standard I require," Matthias said. "My squad will be operating in close proximity to your knight during the assault. If you cannot maintain fire discipline, if you pursue enemies beyond designated zones, you will endanger my brothers. I need confirmation that you will follow operational parameters precisely. Can you provide that confirmation?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to assure him that I was reliable, that my knight would operate exactly as directed, that his concerns were unfounded. But I thought about Lord Arcturus. I thought about the 20% of engagements where control slipped. I thought about the possibility of losing control during this operation, with Astartes operating nearby, with friendly forces in potential firing zones. "I will maintain discipline to the best of my ability," I said. The throne Mechanicum carries ancestral presences that sometimes influence combat responses. I manage these influences adequately in most circumstances, but I cannot guarantee perfect control. Matthias studied me for a long moment. "Honesty is preferable to false confidence," he said finally. "I will position my squad to account for potential deviation in your operational patterns. If you feel control degrading during engagement, withdraw from close combat zones immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes, Brother Sergeant." "The Emperor protects," Matthias said. "The Emperor protects," I responded automatically. But I noticed Matthias did not say it with particular conviction. He said it as formula, as ritual phrase. His actual protection would come from tactical planning and careful positioning, not divine intervention. The assault on Svartheim 7 began 3 days later. The cultists were well entrenched, fighting with fanaticism enhanced by whatever dark powers they believed protected them. Our lance advanced through industrial ruins toward their primary stronghold, a manufacturum complex they had converted to fortress. Matthias's squad moved ahead of us, clearing routes and identifying targets. The coordination was efficient. The Astartes marked enemy positions with targeting beacons. We destroyed those positions with night weapons. The advance proceeded methodically. I felt Lord Arcturus stirring as combat intensified. The ancestral presence was restless, eager, pushing against the boundaries I maintained. I reinforced those boundaries consciously. I focused on tactical objectives. I followed Baron Ulrich's orders precisely. We reached the manufacturum perimeter. The cultists had established heavy weapon emplacements in the structure's upper levels. Matthias's squad took cover, while our knights engaged these emplacements. I fired Argentum Fury's battle cannon in controlled bursts, destroying targets systematically. Then something detonated nearby. Large explosion, possibly demolition charge. The blast wave struck Argentum Fury's left side. Void shields absorbed most of the impact, but the knight staggered. Neural feedback transmitted through the throne as disorientation and phantom pain. In that moment of weakness, Lord Arcturus surged forward. The transition was immediate and overwhelming. One moment I was maintaining controlled fire on designated targets. Next moment I was consumed by rage that felt like liquid fire in my nervous system. The boundaries I had constructed dissolved. Lord Arcturus's consciousness expanded to fill spaces I normally occupied. I was still present, still aware, but I was passenger now, not pilot. Through Argentum Fury's visual sensors, I saw cultists fleeing from our advance. They were running towards secondary positions, attempting tactical withdrawal. Lord Arcturus identified them as targets, as enemies, as things that needed to die. I tried to resist. I tried to reassert control, but the rage was overwhelming. It was 400 years of accumulated fury, compressed and concentrated, finally given outlet. Resisting it felt like trying to swim against riptide. Argentum Fury moved forward. I had not commanded this movement. Lord Arcturus had. The knight advanced into the manufacturum complex, pursuing the fleeing cultists. Baron Ulrich's voice came through Vox, ordering me to hold position. I heard him but could not respond. My motor control was not my own. I caught the cultists in a narrow corridor. They turned to fight, small arms fire that sparkled uselessly against Argentum Fury's armor. I fired the battle cannon at point-blank range. The corridor exploded. The cultists disappeared in fire and fragmentation. More. Find more. Kill them all. Lord Arcturus's voice was not external. It was internal, indistinguishable from my own thoughts except for the intensity. I turned Argentum Fury deeper into the complex. Somewhere behind me, my lance was calling for me to return. I processed their calls as irrelevant noise. I found cultist defensive positions in what had been an assembly hall. Dozens of them, attempting to establish firing lines. I crashed through the wall rather than using the entrance. Ferrocrete and metal support beams shattered. The cultists scattered. I killed them methodically. Battle cannon for groups, Reaper chainsword for individuals. I was not choosing targets consciously. Lord Arcturus was selecting them. I was simply executing his will, my body and night responding automatically to intentions that originated from consciousness that was not mine but felt like mine. Then I saw them, Astartes, Matthias's squad. They were advancing through adjacent section of the Manufactorum, clearing rooms, moving with their characteristic coordinated efficiency. They were not in my designated operational zone. They were pursuing their own objectives. Lord Arcturus identified them as targets. The thought appeared fully formed. Armored enemies, threats. Destroy them. I tried to resist. I tried to force recognition that these were allies, that they were Imperial fists, that attacking them was unthinkable betrayal. But Lord Arcturus was not capable of distinguishing ally from enemy. He saw only armor, only weapons, only targets. I raised Argentum Fury's battle cannon. No. No, 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 no. The resistance was mine, purely mine. I was trying to force my consciousness forward, trying to override Lord Arcturus's control. But I had no leverage. He had saturated my neural pathways. He was operating through motor systems that normally required conscious thought, but were responding to his will without my permission. The cannon fired. The round struck the floor near Matthias's squad. It did not hit them directly. The blast scattered them, threw them against walls and equipment. I saw one Astartes, I could not identify which, fall and not rise immediately. Through Vox I heard shouting, confused reports, friendly fire, night weapons. Something was wrong. Matthias's voice cut through the chaos. Argentum Fury, cease fire. We are Imperial forces. Cease fire immediately. Lord Arcturus processed this as irrelevant. The targets were still present. They needed to be eliminated. I tried to force the knight to lower its weapons. The weapons remained raised. I fired again. This time the round struck closer. I saw two Astartes take direct impact from the blast wave. Their armor held, but they were thrown backward with force that would have killed unaugmented humans. Matthias was firing now. Not at me, at the ground near Argentum Fury's feet. Warning shots, desperate attempt to get my attention without destroying the knight. His bolter rounds exploded against Ferrocrete. Castor, his voice through the Vox. Castor, respond. You are firing on friendly forces. Cease fire immediately. I wanted to respond. I tried to activate my Vox controls. Lord Arcturus would not allow it. He was focused entirely on the targets, on destroying them, on completing what he had started. I fired a third time. The round struck directly where Matthias had been standing. I watched the explosion. I watched the figure in yellow armor thrown backward, tumbling, crashing through equipment and debris. I watched him fall. He did not get up. Something broke inside me, not in Lord Arcturus. He felt satisfaction, felt completion. Something broke in me, in the part of my consciousness that Lord Arcturus had not completely consumed, the part that was still Castor Valdane. I forced everything I had remaining into one desperate effort at control, not trying to override Lord Arcturus directly, that was impossible, but trying to interrupt his control just long enough to create opening. The knight's sensory systems included manual override switches for emergency neural disconnect. If pilot became incapacitated or compromised, these switches would sever the throne interface and shut down the knight's motor systems. The switches required physical interaction, the pilot's actual hands pressing actual buttons built into the throne's armrests. I could not move my hands. Lord Arcturus controlled those motor pathways, but I could move my attention. I could force my consciousness to focus on different sensory input, to process different information, and in doing so, I could create momentary distraction in Lord Arcturus's concentration. I forced myself to focus on pain, on the phantom pain that still echoed from the explosion that had started this. I amplified it through conscious attention, made it louder in my awareness, made it demand processing resources. Lord Arcturus's control wavered, just slightly, just for perhaps 1 second. In that second, I moved my left hand 3 centimeters and hit the emergency disconnect. The throne's neural interface severed. The sensation was like falling suddenly, like loss of orientation in three-dimensional space. My consciousness snapped back into my physical body, no longer distributed across night systems. Argentum Fury froze in place. Motor systems disabled, weapons powered down. I was breathing heavily. My hands were shaking. Sweat covered my face despite the throne's climate control. I sat in sudden silence. The Vox had deactivated with the disconnect, cutting off all external communication. What had I done? What had Lord Arcturus made me do? I had fired on Imperial fists. I had wounded them. I might have killed them. I forced my shaking hands to reactivate minimal systems, enough to access external visual sensors. I needed to see. I needed to know. The Mechanicum section where Matthias's squad had been was devastated. My weapons fire had collapsed portions of the structure. Smoke and dust obscured details. I increased sensor magnification, cycling through different visual spectrums, trying to find clear imagery. I found Matthias. He was lying on his back amid the debris. His armor was scorched, cracked along the chest plate. His helmet was gone, blown off or removed. His face was visible. Blood ran from his nose and ears. His eyes were open, but not focused on anything. As I watched, one of his battle brothers reached him. The Astartes knelt beside Matthias, checking vital signs through armored diagnostic systems. Then he looked up toward Argentum Fury. Even at this distance, even through sensors and screens, I felt the weight of his stare. The Astartes activated his Vox. I could not hear what he said. My Vox systems were still offline, but I saw him speaking, reporting, probably, requesting medical support. Or reporting casualty. I sat in the throne, hands still shaking, breathing still irregular, and tried to process what had occurred. I had lost control. Completely. Lord Arcturus had dominated my consciousness and used my night to fire on allies. Brother Sergeant Matthias of the Imperial Fists was wounded, possibly dying, because I had been too weak to maintain control. The House would know. Baron Ulrich would receive reports. The Imperial Fists would demand explanation, possibly demand justice. I had committed one of the most serious failures possible for a night pilot. Loss of control resulting in friendly casualties. I did not know what punishment this carried. Exile, certainly. Possibly execution. The House could not allow pilot who endangered allies to continue service. But punishment was not what consumed my thoughts. What consumed my thoughts was Matthias lying in the debris, blood running from his ears, eyes open but not seeing. I had done that, not intentionally, not through conscious choice, but through my failure to maintain sufficient control over ancestral presences that I had known were dangerous. I could have refused deployment. I could have reported my difficulties with Lord Arcturus to House authorities, requested psychological evaluation or throne recalibration. I had chosen not to because I wanted to continue serving, wanted to maintain my position as night pilot, wanted to prove I was adequate to the role. That choice had consequences. Those consequences were bleeding in yellow armor amid Mechanicum ruins. I reactivated emergency Vox, minimal system that did not require full neural interface. Baron Ulrich's voice came through immediately, demanding status report, demanding explanation. I provided brief summary: neural compromise, ancestral influence, emergency shutdown. Ulrich's response was controlled fury. Remain in position. Do not attempt to restart systems. Recovery team is en route. You will answer for this. I sat in the throne and waited. Around me, the battle continued. I could hear it through Argentum Fury's external audio sensors. Weapons fire, explosions, Vox chatter coordinating tactical movements. The campaign proceeded. The war machine functioned, individual failures were processed, and the system continued. Eventually, the recovery team arrived, tech priests who could safely shut down and secure a night with potentially compromised systems. They performed their rituals and diagnostics. They confirmed the night was stable. They opened the throne chamber and extracted me. I emerged into cold air and harsh light. My legs were unsteady. Extended neuro interface always caused temporary disorientation upon disconnect. A medicae checked my vital signs and declared me physically sound. Psychologically was different question. Baron Ulrich was waiting. "Come with me," he said. I followed him away from Argentum Fury, away from the tech priests performing their maintenance rituals. We walked through the battle-scarred industrial zone until we reached a relatively intact structure that had been converted to temporary command post. Inside, Matthias was lying on a field medicae table. He was alive. Unconscious, but alive. His armor had been removed. I could see the injuries now. Severe contusions, internal bleeding, possible fractures. The medici attending him had connected various monitoring devices. The readouts showed vital signs that were stable but concerning. "Brother Sergeant Matthias will survive," Ulrich said. "His physiology is augmented beyond normal human capacity. He can endure injuries that would kill lesser soldiers, but he will require extended recovery, 6 weeks minimum before he can return to active duty. His squad lost valuable combat capability because their leader is incapacitated." I stared at Matthias's unconscious form. "I did not intend—" "Intention is irrelevant," Ulrich interrupted. "Outcome is what matters. You lost control. You fired on allies. You wounded Astartes. These facts are not disputable. What is disputable is whether you can continue serving as night pilot. I understand if the House requires—" "The House requires nothing," Ulrich said. "The House faces difficult situation. Argentum Fury is valuable war machine. Knight paladins of its age and capability are rare. But machines require pilots. Pilots who are reliable. Pilots who can maintain psychological discipline under combat stress. You have demonstrated you cannot do this." He gestured toward Matthias. "Look at him. Really look. See what your failure costs." I looked. I saw the injuries. I saw the monitoring equipment tracking his recovery. I saw the consequences of my inadequacy made physical and immediate. "Lord Arcturus is too strong in Argentum Fury's throne," Ulrich continued. "His presence has always been problematic, but manageable by experienced pilots. You are not experienced enough. You have not developed sufficient psychological resilience. Perhaps you would have eventually. But eventually is not useful after incident like this." "What will happen to me?" I asked. "You will not pilot Argentum Fury again," Ulrich said. "That is certain. Whether you will pilot any knight is question for the House Council. They will convene to review this incident and determine appropriate response. Until then, you are relieved of all duties. You will return to House Estates and await judgment. And Argentum Fury will be assigned to your cousin Hadrian Valdane," Ulrich said. "He has piloted backup knights for 3 years. He shows strong psychological discipline. He will take the throne." I wanted to warn Ulrich. I wanted to explain that Hadrian would face the same challenges, that Lord Arcturus would push against his control, just as he had pushed against mine. That the problem was not pilot inadequacy, but fundamental flaw in how Throne Mechanicum preserved consciousness. But I said nothing, because warning Ulrich meant admitting the system was flawed. And if the system was flawed, if ancestral presence in thrones created inherent danger, then what did that mean for every knight house across the Imperium? What did that mean for the institution we had built our identity around? Better to blame the pilot. Better to classify this as individual failure. Better to maintain the fiction that Throne Mechanicum was blessing rather than curse. I left the command post. I returned to transport ship. I traveled back to Adarath. I waited. The House Council convened 14 days after the incident. 7 senior members of House Valdane, including Baron Ulrich, my father, and 3 other bloodline elders. They conducted the hearing in the council chamber, a formal room decorated with banners showing our house's campaign history and heraldry. I stood before them and provided complete testimony. I described the neural interface experience, the ancestral presences, Lord Arcturus's emergence, the progressive loss of control, the moment of firing on friendlies. I did not minimize my responsibility. I did not make excuses. I presented facts and accepted accountability. The council deliberated for 7 hours. I waited in adjacent chamber, alone except for house guards who ensured I did not leave. I sat and thought about Matthias. I wondered if he had recovered. I wondered if he would hate me. I wondered if hatred was adequate response to what I had done. Eventually the council recalled me. Baron Ulrich delivered their judgment. The council has determined that you are unfit to pilot any knight, he said. Your psychological resilience is insufficient for Throne Mechanicum interface. You pose danger to allies and to yourself. Therefore, you are permanently stripped of pilot certification and all associated honors. I understand. Additionally, Ulrich continued, you are exiled from active house military operations. You may not participate in campaigns, you may not train as pilot, you may not enter the sacristy without explicit council permission. You will retain your bloodline status, but your martial privileges are revoked. For how long? Indefinitely, Ulrich said. This is not temporary punishment. This is permanent reassignment. You will find other ways to serve the house, administration, logistics, diplomatic functions. But you will not pilot. You will not fight. My father had remained silent during the deliberation. He remained silent now, but I saw his expression. It was not anger, it was disappointment. Perhaps worse than anger. He had trained me, had introduced me to the throne, had believed I would carry the family tradition forward. I had failed. I had proven unworthy of the inheritance. Do you accept this judgment? Ulrich asked. Yes, Baron, I said. Then you are dismissed. I left the council chamber. I returned to my family estates. I existed in strange limbo, still member of House Valdane by blood, but removed from the purpose that had defined my life since age 12. I learned that Hadrian had bonded successfully with Argentum Fury. He had completed his first deployment without incident. The knight functioned properly under his command. Lord Arcturus remained present, but Hadrian maintained control. The system continued. I tried to feel relieved that the knight had capable pilot. Instead, I felt hollow. Argentum Fury had been mine. The throne had been mine. Now it belonged to someone else, and I was relegated to administrative irrelevance. Weeks passed. I attempted to adapt to new role. House leadership assigned me to logistics coordination, managing supply chains for night deployments, processing requisition requests, organizing transport schedules. The work was necessary but meaningless. I performed it adequately. I felt nothing. 3 months after my exile, Matthias requested meeting with me. He had recovered fully. His injuries had healed through combination of Astartes physiology and advanced medical intervention. He had returned to active duty with his chapter. But before deploying to New Warzone, he had traveled to Adarath specifically to see me. We met in neutral location, an observation tower overlooking the house training grounds. Matthias arrived in his power armor, bearing his chapter's colors. His face still carried the scar across his left cheek. New scars had joined it, thin lines across his jaw and forehead, probably from the injuries I had caused. He looked at me with expression I could not read. Assessment, perhaps, or curiosity. You asked to see me? I said. I wanted to understand what happened, Matthias said. The official reports describe neural compromise and ancestral influence. These explanations are technically accurate but incomplete. I want to hear your direct account. I provided it. I described the Throne Mechanicum's function, the ancestral presences, Lord Arcturus specifically, the progressive loss of control during combat. I explained everything I had experienced, everything I had felt, everything I had failed to prevent. Matthias listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You were overcome by consciousness not your own, he said finally. You became instrument of another's will. This is similar to possession, though mechanism is technological rather than demonic. I should have maintained control, I said. The pilot is supposed to command. I failed at this fundamental requirement. You failed because the requirement is unreasonable, Matthias said. The throne Mechanicum contains accumulated consciousness of dozens of previous pilots. You are one mind attempting to maintain dominance over collective weight of many minds. This is not test of will. This is inevitable submission. Other pilots manage it, I said. Other pilots compromise, Matthias said. They allow ancestral influence to guide their actions, to shape their decisions, to progressively erode their individual agency until distinction between pilot and ancestor becomes irrelevant. They believe they are maintaining control because the loss of control is gradual enough to be imperceptible. But they are not truly commanding. They are facilitating. They are allowing dead men to pilot through them. I had never heard anyone articulate this. Within night houses, the ancestral presences were framed as blessing, as strength, as accumulated wisdom. Questioning them was questioning the foundation of our tradition. You believe Throne Mechanicum is flawed system, I said. I believe Throne Mechanicum is effective system with significant costs, Matthias said. It produces capable war machines piloted by consciousness that carries centuries of combat experience. But it does so by slowly consuming individual pilots and replacing them with composite consciousness that serves the machine rather than commanding it. This is acceptable trade for the Imperium. The Imperium values function over individuality, but it is cost nonetheless. Why are you telling me this? Because you experienced the cost directly, Matthias said. You fought against ancestral dominance and lost. This failure exiled you from your role and destroyed your purpose. But your failure also preserved your consciousness. Had you submitted to Lord Arcturus completely, had you allowed his rage to become indistinguishable from your own, you would have continued piloting. You would have remained night pilot, respected and honored. But you would not have remained Castor Valdane. You would have become something else. Composite entity wearing your name but expressing ancestral will. He gestured toward the training grounds below, where young scions practiced with simulation equipment. They will all face the same choice eventually. Submit or resist. Most will submit because submission is easier and produces acceptable results. You resisted. This cost you everything, but it preserved who you are. Exiled administrator processing logistics requests. What you are now is conscious individual who understands the true nature of the system, Matthias said. This is rare. Most never recognize what they are becoming. They pilot and fight and gradually fade into the throne's accumulated consciousness, never realizing they are no longer themselves. You retained clarity. This matters. It does not matter if I cannot do anything with it, I said. Perhaps, Matthias agreed. But clarity has value even when action is impossible. You carry knowledge. You witness. This is sufficient purpose. He turned to leave, then paused. I do not blame you for what happened. You fired on my squad under influence you could not control. The responsibility lies with the system that placed you in that situation, not with your individual failure to overcome that system. If blame must be assigned, assign it to the Throne Mechanicum itself, or to the Imperium that insists on using such technology despite its costs. The Imperium will not change, I said. No, Matthias agreed. It will not. The machine continues, but individual understanding still matters. Remember what you learned. Bear witness to it. This is all anyone can do within a system too vast to alter. He left. I remained in the observation tower, watching young pilots train below, knowing they would eventually face what I had faced, knowing most would not recognize it as choice, because the choice was designed to feel like natural progression. I thought about Lord Arcturus. 400 years of rage, compressed and preserved, poisoning every pilot who bonded with Argentum fury. How many pilots had lost control partially or completely? How many had committed similar incidents, but in circumstances where friendly forces were not present to witness? How many had gradually submitted to his influence until they could no longer distinguish his rage from their own? I thought about Hadrian, currently piloting the knight that had destroyed my life. He would be strong. He would maintain control. until the day he did not. Until the day Lord Arcturus found his weakness, his moment of vulnerability, his opening. And then what? Another incident? Another pilot disgraced and exiled? Or would Hadrian be more fortunate? Would his loss of control occur in circumstances where only enemies suffered, where his rampage could be classified as battlefield effectiveness rather than catastrophic failure? The system perpetuated itself. Flawed pilots were removed. New pilots took their place. The knights continued fighting. The Imperium continued requiring their service. Individual costs were absorbed and the machine continued. I understood this now. I was one cost. Matthias had been another cost, injured but recovered. The next cost was being trained below me, practicing diligently, believing competence and dedication would protect them from the throne's consumption. Months became years. I performed my administrative role adequately. I processed logistics. I managed supply chains. I was useful in forgettable way. I watched Hadrian's career. He deployed 17 times over 3 years. He fought effectively. He received commendation for tactical excellence. He showed no signs of controlled difficulties. The house was pleased with his performance. I wondered how much of that performance was Hadrian and how much was accumulated ancestors. I wondered if Hadrian even knew. I wondered if the distinction mattered as long as outcomes were acceptable. On the 3rd anniversary of my exile, I received unexpected message. Hadrian requested private meeting. We met in the family estate's gardens, neutral territory away from military facilities. Hadrian looked tired. Not physically, night pilots maintained excellent conditioning. But psychologically, he had developed tension around his eyes, tightness in his jaw, signs of sustained stress inadequately managed. I need to ask you something, Hadrian said without preamble. About the throne. About the ancestors. What about them? How did you know? Hadrian asked. How did you know when you were losing control? What did it feel like? I understood immediately. Lord Arcturus. Yes, Hadrian said. He is persistent. During my first year, I barely noticed him. Background presence, occasional impulse toward aggression. Manageable. But recently, he has become stronger, more insistent. During my last 3 deployments, I felt him pushing forward, trying to dominate my decision-making. I have maintained control, but it requires increasing effort. And I am concerned about what happens when effort is not sufficient. Have you reported this to Baron Ulrich? No, Hadrian said. Reporting psychological difficulties results in evaluation. Evaluation might result in removal from pilot status. I do not want to be removed. Piloting Argentum Fury is my purpose. I cannot surrender it, even if maintaining it endangers allies. Hadrian was silent. I lost control, I said. Completely. Lord Arcturus dominated my consciousness and used my knight to fire on Imperial fists. Brother Sergeant Matthias nearly died. I was exiled for this failure. If you are experiencing similar difficulties, you need to report them before you reach the same point. But you were weak, Hadrian said. You could not maintain sufficient psychological discipline. I am stronger. I can manage the ancestral presences if I just develop better techniques, better mental conditioning. I heard myself in his words. The same rationalizations I had made, the same belief that competence and will were sufficient, the same refusal to acknowledge that the problem was systemic rather than individual. Lord Arcturus killed in rage 400 years ago, I said. That rage did not dissipate. It was preserved in the throne's neural patterns. Every pilot since has carried it. The throne does not distinguish between useful combat aggression and pathological violence. It preserves both. Lord Arcturus was pathological. His consciousness poisons every pilot who bonds with the throne. This is not individual weakness. This is design flaw. If it is design flaw, then every throne in the Imperium carries similar flaws, Hadrian said. Every night pilot faces ancestral influences that might be destructive. Are you suggesting the entire night tradition is fundamentally flawed? Yes, I said. That is exactly what I am suggesting. Hadrian looked at me as though I had committed heresy. Perhaps I had. Questioning foundational traditions of imperial institutions was dangerous territory. I cannot accept that, Hadrian said finally. The knights have served for thousands of years. They have won countless battles. They have protected the Imperium from threats that would have destroyed lesser forces. This service is not accidental. It is produced by the throne Mechanicum's design. If that design includes costs, those costs are acceptable. Are they acceptable when the cost is your consciousness? I asked. When the cost is becoming vehicle for dead men's rage? If that rage serves the Imperium, yes, Hadrian said. We are not important as individuals. We are important as pilots. If we must surrender some portion of individual identity to pilot effectively, this is acceptable sacrifice. The Emperor requires service, not preservation of self. He believed this completely. He had internalized the Imperium's logic so thoroughly that his own consumption appeared noble rather than tragic. I realized then that I could not save him. I could warn him. I could testify to what I had experienced, but I could not force him to recognize the danger. He would continue piloting. He would continue gradually surrendering to Lord Arcturus's influence. He would rationalize each small loss of control as necessary aggression, each impulse toward violence as tactical instinct, until the day control failed completely. Until the day he did what I had done, or worse. Thank you for speaking with me, Hadrian said. I needed to understand your experience. Now I do. I will apply your lessons. I will maintain better discipline. I will not repeat your failure. He left. I watched him go. I knew I would not see him again except at formal house functions. I knew he would continue piloting until the throne consumed him or circumstances forced his removal. I knew the system would continue. I considered attempting to report my concerns to higher house authorities, to explain that Argentum Fury's throne carried consciousness that made incidents like mine inevitable. But what would that achieve? The house would not decommission valuable knight, because one pilot claimed ancestral presences were dangerous. They would classify my testimony as bitterness, as failed pilot attempting to rationalize his inadequacy by blaming the machine. I considered reaching beyond house authorities to Mechanicus representatives or Imperial command structures, but they would respond similarly. The throne Mechanicum was ancient technology, blessed by Mars, proven through millennia of service. One pilot's psychological difficulties did not invalidate the entire system, so I remained silent. I performed my administrative duties. I watched from distance as Hadrian continued deploying. I waited for the inevitable. The incident came 18 months after our conversation. Hadrian was deployed against Orc invasion on Agri-World designated Talvos IV. The campaign was routine suppression operation. Destroy Orc positions, protect agricultural infrastructure, eliminate Xeno's presence. During the engagement, Hadrian broke formation and pursued routing Orcs into civilian evacuation zones. He fired into structures that had not been confirmed clear of civilian presence. Multiple buildings were destroyed. Casualty reports estimated between 40 and 60 civilian deaths from night weapons fire. The after-action reports classified it as tactical error rather than psychological compromise. Hadrian reported that he had believed the buildings were empty, that he had prioritized eliminating Orc forces over confirming civilian absence. Baron Ulrich accepted this explanation. Hadrian received reprimand for inadequate target verification, but retained his pilot status. I read the reports. I recognized what had truly occurred. Lord Arcturus had pushed through Hadrian's control. The rage had manifested. Hadrian had killed without discrimination. But because the primary victims were civilians rather than allies, because the deaths could be classified as error rather than deliberate friendly fire, the incident was processed as acceptable cost of aggressive combat operations. Hadrian continued piloting. I realized then that my incident had been unusual only in target selection. Night pilots lost control regularly. They killed excessively. They pursued enemies beyond tactical necessity. They inflicted violence that exceeded mission requirements. But as long as that violence was directed at designated enemies or acceptable casualties, the system classified it as effective performance rather than psychological compromise. Lord Arcturus was not aberration. He was expression of what the throne Mechanicum produced intentionally. The system wanted aggressive pilots. It wanted consciousness that would kill without hesitation or restraint. It achieved this by preserving and propagating ancestral rage. Individual pilots who resisted this programming, who maintained psychological boundaries, who questioned the impulses the throne generated, were classified as inadequate. Pilots who submitted, who allowed ancestral violence to flow through them without resistance, were celebrated as exemplars. I had been inadequate. Hadrian was becoming exemplar. The difference was submission. Years passed. I existed in my administrative exile. I processed logistics. I watched new pilots train. I observed deployments from distance. I accumulated data about incidents that were not classified as incidents. Civilian casualties marked as tactical errors. Excessive force marked as aggressive combat. Friendly fire marked as coordination failures. The pattern was consistent. The system produced these outcomes regularly. The system processed these outcomes as acceptable. Individual pilots bore responsibility, but only when consequences exceeded acceptable parameters. Most consequences remained within acceptable range. I thought often about what Matthias had said. That clarity had value even when action was impossible. That witnessing mattered even when the witness could not alter what was witnessed. I was clear now. I understood what Throne Mechanicum truly was. I understood what it cost. I understood that this cost was intentional, that the Imperium had designed the system knowing it would consume pilots, knowing it would perpetuate violence beyond tactical necessity, accepting these outcomes as reasonable price for effective war machines. I witnessed this. I carried the knowledge. I could not change the system. I could only testify to what the system was. I exist now in permanent exile. I process logistics for House Valdane night deployments. I am 41 years old. I have not piloted for 16 years. I will never pilot again. Hadrian continues commanding Argentum Fury. He has achieved senior pilot status. He is effective. He kills efficiently. The House celebrates his service. No one discusses the civilians on Talvo's IV. No one discusses how his combat patterns have become progressively more violent, how his pursuit of enemies has become more obsessive, how his tactical decisions prioritize destruction over precision. No one discusses this, because these patterns are not recognized as problems. They are recognized as proper night pilot aggression. They are what the system wants. Lord Arcturus rides in Argentum Fury's throne, 400 years of rage still potent, still influencing every pilot who bonds with the machine. Hadrian carries him now. Eventually, Hadrian will be replaced. Age or death or incident that exceeds acceptable parameters. The next pilot will take the throne. Lord Arcturus will remain. The cycle continues. The throne accumulates consciousness. The consciousness shapes pilots. Pilots become instruments of accumulated rage. The rage is directed against the Imperium's enemies. Sometimes it is directed against the Imperium's allies. Sometimes it is directed against the Imperium's civilians. But always it is directed somewhere. Always it finds outlet. Always it perpetuates itself. This is what night houses are, not noble warriors piloting blessed machines, psychological prisoners operating war engines haunted by dead men's violence. We tell ourselves we are in control. We tell ourselves the ancestors guide and strengthen us. We tell ourselves this is honor. But I know what it truly is. I experienced it. I felt my consciousness displaced by rage that was not mine, forced to watch as my knight committed atrocity I could not prevent, bearing responsibility for actions I did not choose but could not refuse. I lost everything for resisting. Hadrian has been celebrated for submitting. The system punishes resistance and rewards submission. This is how it perpetuates itself. I remember the throne's temperature, 37.2 degrees Celsius, precisely calibrated to facilitate neural interface while preventing thermal stress. The warmth was comfortable, inviting. It felt natural to sink into the throne, to accept its connection, to allow consciousness to expand beyond individual boundaries. I understand now that this comfort was designed. The throne was engineered to feel natural, to encourage acceptance, to reduce psychological resistance to what it would do to you. I carry this knowledge. I witness what the system is and what it costs. I cannot change it. I cannot save Hadrian or any pilot who will follow. I can only testify. The Imperium requires knights. Knights require pilots. Pilots require thrones. Thrones consume pilots. This is the cycle. This is what I am part of. This is what I enabled by accepting my role until the moment I could no longer accept it. I am complicit. I perpetuated the system through my service. I trained to pilot. I bonded with the throne. I accepted ancestral presences as natural. I told younger pilots that the throne was blessing. I was part of the mechanism that transforms individuals into instruments. My resistance came too late. It came only after I had already served, already killed under ancestral influence, already demonstrated to others that the system was functional and participation was noble. The damage I prevented by being removed is insignificant compared to the damage I caused by serving initially, by validating through my participation that this was an acceptable way to exist. But I was removed. I cannot serve anymore. I cannot perpetuate the cycle directly. I can only observe and testify and carry the knowledge that the system continues. Hadrian pilots, Lord Arcturus rides with him. New scions train below in the practice yards, preparing for the day they will take thrones and accept the same burden, the same gradual consumption, the same transformation from individual to instrument. The Emperor requires this, they tell themselves. The Imperium needs knights. Knights need pilots. Pilots need thrones. The logic is circular and complete. There is no exit. There is no reform. There is only continuation. I think sometimes about destroying Argentum Fury, about sabotaging the throne so thoroughly that it cannot be repaired, so completely that Lord Arcturus's consciousness is finally erased. But this would be classified as heresy and treason. I would be executed. The house would commission new throne. The cycle would continue. I think sometimes about warning every new pilot, about explaining exactly what the throne will do to them, about giving the knowledge I lacked. But they would not believe me. They would classify my testimony as bitterness. They want to pilot. They want the honor.
They will not accept that honor is prison until they are already trapped. So I remain silent except for this testimony, this accounting, this record of what I experienced and what I understand. The throne Mechanicum maintains 37.2 degrees Celsius. The warmth is inviting. The connection is comfortable. The ancestors are present. They will consume you. If you resist, you will be removed. If you submit, you will be celebrated. Either way, you will no longer be yourself. This is what it means to pilot Imperial Knight. This is the cost house tradition extracts. This is what the Imperium requires. I am Castor Valdane. I piloted Knight Paladin Argentum Fury for 3 years. I was exiled for psychological inadequacy 16 years ago. I exist now as administrator, as witness, as testament to what the system truly is. And I remember the throne's warmth. I will never feel it again. This is what remains.